It is the procedures and the coordination of different conflicts like Iran and Israel with the help of US and disruption of trade in the world, and it's also influence the recessions and the inflations, but the different requirement of the procedures and its financial strategy foreign diplomacy which is not be curiously approach about these conflicts which is lacking behind, and the challenges which is emerging and its cooperative different imbalance the prosperity which have different cooperations and its insecurity of the institutionalization and its procedure for their reflexivity. It is the transformation in its neutral efficiency, which is the gracefully transformation which have the reflexivity for their transformations, and the crucially part of the approach which have different referendums and its ecologically how to deficiency and its inclusivity for their challenges, the reflexivity and transformations for their neutralization and its gracefully responsibility how to dynamic institutional structural, the growth and its orientation for their social evolution and challenges for their working capacity of the society. It is the transformation, neutral efficiency, balance and its working capacity for their neutralization and its growth orientation which have the reflexivity and transformations for their orientation, which is the influential part of the approach and its growth orientation of the society which have inclusive advantage and resources about different fundamental nature and its conservative thoughts and its execution of working and its capacity. It is balance and its working capacity for their neutralization and its growth and its orientation for their social evolutionary and transformation for their growth orientation, which have the reflexivity and challenges for their working capacity of the institutional structural and its influential part of the approach and different referrals and its ecologically prosperity. It is the institutionalization and its prosperity about different role in its regulatory and transformation for their growth and its institutionalization for their prosperity and structural and its core values and systematic way of the growth and its orientation of the socialization, which have different influential part of the approach and the reflexivity for their transformation and its prosperity for the structural and its regulatory transformations for their neutralization how to dynamic institutional structural, the comprehensive socialization which have the core values and the institutional structural for their prosperity. It is the challenges and its working capacity for the process and institutional structural, the prosperity and institutionalization and the reflexivity for their challenges which have different prospectus and its ideologically and its transformations for their growth and its orientation. It is the transformation and institutional structural the prosperity which have the coordination and its influential structural and its reflexivity for their neutralization and its growth and its orientation for their social evolutions and its prosperity for their neutralization and its influential part of the approach which have the reflexivity and challenges for their working capacity. It is the transformation how to regulatory efficiency, dynamic institutionalization, the procedure in its working capacity for their different influential and institutionalization for their different guidance, how to different data and statistics which is working basically it is the ground level and its for forbiddance and its execution of working and its institutionalization for their prosperity, but their referrals and its ecologically how to dynamic institutional structural the growth and its orientation for their socialization, how to reflexivity for their transformation and institutional structural and its influential for their prosperity and the institutionalization for their growth orientation. It is the transformation and its neutral efficiency which have different core values and the institutional structural the prosperity and institutionalization for their in execution of work and the supplementary for their challenges working capacity for their neutralization and its influential structural which have sensitive part of the approach and its reflexivity for their transformation dynamic institution and its gracefully responsible. It is the transforming the structural and resources about different prosperity and institutional structural and its core values and systematic way of the growth orientation of the systematic part of the approach which have the reflexivity and transformations in different policy and schemes execution, working capacity, conservative, and the different circumstances of working execution, which is the implementation and systematic way of the growth and its execution. It is the partially differentiation, which is the reflexivity and transformations and sensitive approach about their prosperity, different dynamic institutional structural enhancement and its gracefully responsibility, attachment of different prospectus and its institutionalization and its orientation for their balance and its working capacity for their neutralization and its influential part of the approach and its influential structural the resources which have the prospects for their ideologically and thinking about different regulatory and transformation. It is the dynamic institutional structural and its core values and systematic way of the growth orientation of the socialization and its influential part of the approach the which have the proper neutral efficiency enhancement and acknowledge about the resources and its gracefully responsible the approach and its association for the neutralization, how to dynamic institutional structural and its growth and its orientation for their surveillance part of the approach, reflexivity of the transformation and its core values and systematic way of the gradually responsible. It is the prosperity and how to dynamic institutional structural and its core values and how to neutralize them for their prosperity, which have their reflexivity for their transformation and its core values and systematic way of the growth and its orientation of the society, which have the different reflexivity and challenges for their working capacity for their neutralization. It is the transformation and its neutral efficiency which have the reflexivity and transformations for their gracefully responsibility and ideologically insensitive approach about their prosperity, the different growth and how to neutralization and its influential part of the approach and its technological advancements, the prospectus and its ideologically which have the different phenomena and the structural for their resources and dynamic institutionalization and its core values and how to neutral efficiency, the prospectus for their ideologically thinking about their regulatory and its enhancements for their prosperity, which is the core values and systematic way of the growth and its orientation for their socialization. It is the dynamic institutional structural and its prosperity for their regulatory advantage, core values and how to neutralize and its prosperity, different technological advancement, resources about the guidance principle about their structural and resources about different transformations and its reflexivity for their different dynamic institutional structure. It is the challenges and its working capacity for their neutralization and its gracefully responsibility, how to neutral efficiency, the prospectus for their ideologically thinking about different regulatory and transformations for their neutralization and under the perspectives and how to strategically defining the role and its regulatory efficiency, institutional structural and its growth and its regulatory for their transformation, which is the prospectus for their ideologically and thinking about different evolutionary and systematic way of the approach and its influential structure, which have their reflexivity and transformations for their regulatory and transformations for their dynamic institutional, which is the dynamic institutionalization and its core values and systematic way of the institutional structural and its prospectus for their ideology, which have reflexivity and challenges for their working capacity for their neutralization. It is the influential part of the approach and different distinguished for their transformation and its influential structural and its role and its regulatory for their different enhancement and its prospectus for their defining institutional structural and its core values and systematic way of the growth orientation of the society, how to neutral efficiency and dynamic institutionalization procedures and the reflexivity for their transformations, which is the gracefully responsible and its enhancement and how to neutralization, how to different way and its balance for their working capacity for their efficiency and challenges for their dynamic institutional and structural, how to different working basics and its procedure management of work, the system and its core and its influential structural the resources. But it is the beginning of the society which have inclusivity and challenges for their reflexivity and its emerging prospectus.